What if I told you that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' obscene demands are caught on tape, and these recordings could completely destroy their careers? Let me break this down for you because this is absolutely insane. You remember Blake and Ryan, the power couple that had this massive kerfuffle with Wayfarer around the time of the It Ends With Us film premiere? Well, things just got nuclear. Blake Lively was basically telling everyone to unfollow Baldoni. She forced Baldoni to do a premiere on his own. He wasn't allowed on the red carpet with any other cast members, and the entire cast unfollowed him on social media. But here's what we know now that changes everything. Ryan Reynolds was running his mouth all over Hollywood. He was talking to his agents at WME and using those agents plus Sony to force Baldoni and Wayfarer to concede to their demands. And here's the kicker. We now have recorded phone calls. These recordings are actual evidence in this case. Jamie Heath, one of the producers, admits they exist. He recorded phone calls not only with WME, which is the talent agency repping both Ryan and Blake, along with Baldoni and Wayfarer, but he also has recorded calls with Sony. The information about these calls was filed as an exhibit in court yesterday. Why was this filed? Because Wayfarer had to respond to Blake Lively's motion for sanctions. She claimed they had spoliated evidence, meaning they deleted it, and she was asking for very severe sanctions. One of those sanctions would mean that Wayfarer couldn't even have a defense claiming there was no smear campaign against her. So they filed like a 30-page response with a motion and then attached 40 to 60 documents to prove their claims. Now, I'm not going to predict how the judge will rule, but from what I've seen, I don't think Blake Lively has presented enough proof that Wayfarer intentionally deleted evidence. Wayfarer's team does a really good job breaking down why they didn't intentionally delete anything. And more importantly, she's not even prejudiced by any alleged deletion because she has tons of evidence that she claims proves her case anyway. But here's where it gets really interesting. Wayfarer also has evidence of their own, proving that Blake Lively was running her own smear campaign. They spoke quite a bit in this motion about how Blake was the cause of her own demise. She's the one that created the bad press. She made the decision to market alcohol at domestic violence awareness events. She made the decision to exclude Baldoni from the premiere. All of her choices through this process contributed to what happened, and they claim they had nothing to do with it. And get this, Blake Lively herself admitted through this lawsuit that she saw spikes in negative press on August 6th. But here's the problem. Wayfarer didn't even have crisis PR rep Jennifer Abel-Wallace on staff or as a contractor by then. So how did they explain the August 6th spike? And then Wayfarer asks, how did crisis PR turn the entire internet against her in just 2 days? It would be impossible. They have really valid arguments, but what I'm more interested in is the evidence. And the evidence they attached, it proves that Blake was doing things behind the scenes that would shock you. Things that made WME panic. But what exactly was on those recorded calls? Stay with me. So what exactly did Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively say on those recorded calls that was so damning they had to be preserved as evidence? Let me tell you about Jamie Heath's testimony, because this is where it gets absolutely wild. The evidence that Wayfarer attached includes examples of WME conversations that prove Blake was causing major problems behind the scenes. This is exactly why Wayfarer needed to get crisis PR in the first place. And they're saying this has zero to do with the sexual harassment claims Blake is making. In testimony that Jamie Heath gave, he revealed that he recorded his call with WME agent Danny Greenberg. Here's what he said. Danny then called me after the call with Patrick. He may have been on the call with Patrick as well as Danny, I just don't recall. He called me shortly after the call with Patrick and was going to read us a letter that the Reynolds, I guess I can refer to both of them as the Reynolds, had written, and I could not believe what was happening. So I recorded it, so I wanted it documented. He didn't just want it documented. Danny Greenberg was going to dictate a letter to him over the phone, and he didn't have a hard copy, so he wanted to record it so he could actually write it down and have it preserved. This was when Blake and Ryan wanted Wayfarer to put out that statement on August 12th. You know the one, where they would essentially say, we aren't man enough, there were problems on the set, and it's all our fault. So Jamie Heath has that entire call recorded where Blake and Ryan, her husband, are demanding that Wayfarer take the fall for everything. That's all on tape. Then, the attorneys asked him about the Sony marketing call. Here's what Heath said. In the Sony call, we were planning how to navigate these two different premieres, the ins and outs about it, how it was going to look. We had what I believed was a really good relationship with Sony, but it started feeling like there was, and while I understand they kind of have to play middlemen or whatever they think is going on or not, the document cuts off there, but I think the implication is clear. They believed they had a good relationship with Sony, not realizing that Sony was beginning to take Blake Lively's side. Or Sony was siding with Lively simply because Blake and her husband are more powerful. Let me be crystal clear here. Wayfarer is being generous when they call Blake Lively A-list. The only reason Blake Lively would be considered A-list is because of her proximity to her husband. Ryan Reynolds would be considered A-list, at least at this point when this was all being filmed, because he had the Deadpool franchise. He was the highest paid actor next to The Rock in 2024. Deadpool and Wolverine grossed more than any other film that year, or maybe second, over $1 billion. Ryan is A-list because of his involvement in the Deadpool franchise. No other films he's been in have come close to that success. So Ryan's success is really wrapped up in that relationship with Marvel, but that makes him quote-unquote A-list. And then Blake has proximity to other A-listers like Taylor Swift. So Blake doesn't have the kind of power that her husband has, but Sony is going to try to massage that relationship because Ryan is a powerful person in Hollywood given the amount of money he makes for these studios. And studios seem to only care about money. Unfortunately, in this case, Sony hung Wayfarer out to dry. And it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, it was Wayfarer that really brought this project to life. Sony didn't come on until 2022, after 3 years of development. But what Sony allowed to happen next would amount to what some would call theft in any other industry. The $30 million hijacking was about to begin. Imagine investing $30 million of your own money into a film only to be locked out of your own premiere and hidden in the basement. That's exactly what happened here. Let me explain the financial structure of this film because it's crucial to understanding why this is so outrageous. Wayfarer had to put together an entire script. They'd been working on draft scripts for years. They paid for the IP themselves. Sony doesn't own the intellectual property in any capacity. When filming happened, they were forced to change gears because Sony was going to be the distributor. Then Sony started pushing their agenda, which included, you need to hire Blake, you need to do this, you need to do that. The truth is that the bulk of the money put up for this film was put up by Wayfarer. Listen to Steve Sarawitz's testimony about what occurred at the premiere. This is devastating. There's a couple other things. They had locked our entire team, including myself, who, as you mentioned, put the $30 million figure into the movie. They locked me completely out of the premiere along with Justin and Jamie and everyone else, and relegated us to the basement in a separate area. We were also not allowed on the red carpet except at specified times. They isolated Justin from all of the publicity, so he was not allowed to be publicized with anyone else, not allowed to be photographed with anyone else. But here's what probably bothered him most. Blake actively fired our editors, our composer, and our assistant producer, among other things. She had Bluston removed from the poster, and then removed what Justin had in his cut from her cut, which was released. Think about this for a second. Sony allowed Ryan and Blake to hijack a film that wasn't paid for by them. Sony did the distribution, meaning they're not paying for the production. They're paying for the distribution. They're the marketing side. They're the ones that get it into theaters. You can't get a film into theaters unless you get a studio to distribute it for you. So they're not paying for production. They're paying for distribution. Sony enabled Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively to shut out the people that fronted the $30 million for this film to be made. Sony allowed Blake to fire editors, composers, and producers. None of this was in the contract with Sony. Sony shouldn't have had this kind of say, but they did because they're Sony, and there were apparently no consequences for them. Well,
I guess the consequences are that the CEO of Sony, who was part of this, is now gone. Josh, one of the main people they were dealing with at Sony, has left Sony. The CEO of the bigger Sony has left, and there's been a huge influx of executives getting kicked out.
Sony was in a state of chaos during this time. They had lost $71 million on 2 films that bombed that year, and they were desperate for a hit. They needed this one to be the hit. So what they did was screw Wayfarer and hedge their money on Blake and Ryan when they didn't have the right to do that. If this were in any other industry, this would be theft. It would be coercion. It would be fraud. It would be extortion. $30 million was spent, Wayfarer's money, Steve's money, and they don't even get to go to the premiere. But here's the thing. This isn't the first time Ryan Reynolds has done something like this. His pattern of hijacking projects goes back years, and the evidence is damning. What if I told you Ryan Reynolds has hijacked films before, and Blake Lively has such a toxic reputation that she's considered box office poison? Let me show you the pattern here, because this is not a one-time thing. Ryan Reynolds hijacked Deadpool. He kicked Tim Miller out. Ryan and Tim had a huge fight about the script for the second movie, and Ryan willed his way and got his version made. So Tim Miller quit. Ryan Reynolds essentially stole an entire franchise from Tim Miller, and Tim has described the entire experience as causing him PTSD. Ryan has no problem doing this. Now let's talk about Blake. They tried to pull this same stunt on the rhythm section. Blake attempted to have producers do her version. She wanted her script. She wanted her shots. There was such a fight during post-production with Barbara Broccoli, who produces the James Bond movies, that they got into such a massive conflict, they shelved the movie for 2 years because of what Blake was doing. They weren't even going to release it. And then once it was released, the studio lost $50 million because of what Blake did. So Blake was box office poison, and yet Wayfarer was forced to hire her because of Sony. And then Sony allowed her to hijack the film. In Wayfarer's motion, they wrote, "During the second phase of production, Lively moved to seize control of production. Among other things, she wrestled control over editing, post-production, and marketing from Baldoni and Wayfarer. Ultimately, Lively gained control over the post-production process. They attach evidence from Blake herself, and then another line says, Lively also demanded that Baldoni's film buy credit be removed, and then it's redacted. For these exhibits, Wayfarer cites something from their own records, something from Danny Greenberg's testimony at WME, discovery from Sony, 2 exhibits from Sony, and Justin Baldoni's deposition. This means that their proof that Lively was systematically removing herself from this film isn't just coming from their word. It's Sony's word. It's Blake's word. It's Danny Greenberg's word. And they write, Lively accomplished her takeover through threats that if her demands were not met, she would not participate in marketing of the film, even though she was contractually obligated to do so. For that, they cite evidence from Baldoni and evidence from Sony. So this isn't something they're pulling out of thin air. They have it on record. We've seen some of these texts in the amended complaint in the timeline of relevant events, where Sony is telling Wayfarer that Blake is threatening not to promote. She's threatening to do this. She's threatening to do that. They have evidence directly from Sony, proving that the fight was not about sexual harassment. It was about creative control. But the evidence gets even more damning when you look at what Blake did at the premiere itself, and how she systematically destroyed Baldoni's reputation. What happened on August 7th will shock you. August 7th. That's the day Blake Lively launched a coordinated attack that would destroy Justin Baldoni's reputation. And she did it all while playing the victim. Baldoni's own testimony reveals exactly what Blake demanded. Blake demanded that Sony remove his film by credit. She said he couldn't come to the premiere. She got all the cast to unfollow him on social media on August 7th. Then he's not allowed to the premiere. He can't do any publicity with her, and then suddenly the entire Wayfarer team is in a basement. And then Blake wonders why they needed crisis PR. It was all because she hijacked the film. She wanted it to be her moment. She wanted it to be her film. She didn't want Baldoni to take over her moment. She didn't want to share the spotlight. Wayfarer wrote in their motion, not content with usurping Baldoni's role as director and excluding him from marketing of the film he developed, financed, directed, starred in, he then sidelined, indeed banished him from the premiere, refusing to be photographed with him and demanding that he and his guests be hidden from sight, shunning Baldoni and his guests into another screening room.
They have evidence for this from WME, the talent agency, from Heath's deposition, from Sarah Witt's deposition, and evidence from Wayfarer itself.
Lively's unfollowing of Baldoni on social media, and Lively insisting that Baldoni be stripped of the filmed by Justin Baldoni credit on the movie he developed, sold, directed, and starred in. The motion also mentions that Lively also, and then it's redacted. But the evidence comes from WME and Sony. Here's another thing they mention. Given the role of alcohol abuse in domestic violence cases, Lively used alcoholic drinks, using her Betty Buzz alcohol products such as Riley Waite at promotional events. The public backlash was immediate and unforgiving. They cite a New York Times article for that. The motion continues. Given the circumstances and her hostile conduct, they were understandably concerned about a potential onslaught of negative publicity from Lively, and that's why they hired Melissa Nathan, their crisis PR person. Now here's the critical point. There's a reason we're here today, and why Wayfarer didn't just file a motion to dismiss. And when you understand their strategy, everything makes sense. Wayfarer could have filed a motion to dismiss and made this all go away quickly, but they didn't. And the reason why is absolutely brilliant. Here's the thing. If Wayfarer had done a motion to dismiss, they wouldn't have the evidence to prove what Blake and Ryan did. They wouldn't have received the discovery from Sony. They wouldn't have received the discovery from WME. They wouldn't have been able to depose anyone. But they were able to do all of those things because they went through the legal process. And this is what they need to present to the public about what really happened. Right now, Ryan and Blake's evidence is under seal. They have until December 19th. The judge gave them an extension. But here's the important part. The judge claims he's not going to violate our rights as the public who fund the court system. He says he will not rule on the summary judgments until after he unseals all of these documents. So we will still have the right to see what's in all of this evidence. We just have to wait. The unusual steps Blake and Ryan are taking to seal just statements they made and discussions about what happened is insane. Think of it this way. The Justice Department has been fighting about the unsealing or release of the Epstein files. What has been released in those files and court records, what is not sealed, is more damning than Justin Baldoni's text messages with Blake, or Ryan Reynolds and Blake's text messages with Sony or WME. There's nothing private or confidential about any of this. They're concealing evidence because they don't want the public backlash. That's my opinion. So when it does become public, all of these tactics they're doing right now are delays. Every motion they file, every document they file, it's all in an effort to delay the inevitable public disclosure of what the evidence actually shows. Now, will there be evidence that's not favorable to Wayfarer? Yes, because nobody's perfect in this situation. There will be things that were said by Wayfarer that people won't agree with. Justin Baldoni isn't perfect. None of us are. This was a hostile environment. Blake and Ryan are the driving perpetrators here. But when full documents and testimony come out, you might see things and think, I don't know if I like this, or this is weird that they said this. That will happen because none of us are perfect. But the culpability in this situation and why all these documents are being filed and all these motions are being submitted is because Ryan and Blake are trying to delay this stuff from coming out. They know what's on those recordings. They know WME agents testified to the threats, the coercion, and the extortion that was happening. They know there's a recorded call with Sony about the premiere. And if they're talking about the premiere in those calls, that also means what's being relayed is Ryan making threats and calling Justin Baldoni a sexual predator, running around everywhere telling people he's a sexual predator when nothing of the sort occurred. Ryan's only belief that Baldoni is a sexual predator is because of his book. In his book, Baldoni said there may have been times in his youth that he crossed boundaries and lines when it came to consent, because back when we were young, that's what happened. We didn't say, "Can I kiss you?" We didn't say, "Can I hold your hand?" That's where we are with consent these days. Asking for a kiss, asking to hold a hand, respecting body autonomy. We didn't do that growing up. I'm 5 years older than Justin Baldoni. If you wanted to kiss someone, you just kissed someone, and then you found out after the fact if they didn't want to do that. Does that mean he's a rapist? No. You know who's publicly admitted to groping a woman? Ryan Reynolds. He did that to Olivia Wilde on the set of The Change Up with Jason Bateman.
There have been other actresses with loose accusations against Ryan, and people claiming all kinds of weird things about Ryan Reynolds. None of the same for Baldoni, nothing equivalent. And let's talk about WME. WME has been wrapped up in sexual harassment claims for years. They've been part of so many different scandals throughout the years, including their former employees suing them. They're wrapped up in the WWE litigation. They're wrapped up in so many discrimination cases, sexual harassment cases against them. They're not perfect. Ari Emanuel is no longer the head of WME now. He's moved over to the other side. That all happened after this came out. Heads have rolled because of this. And just because you're not seeing it doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But what about the real-world consequences for Blake and Ryan? Has any of this actually affected their careers? The answer might surprise you. Since the scandal broke, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds haven't signed a single major theatrical film. And that's just the beginning of their career collapse. Let me give you some clarity on what's happened since this all came out. Ryan Reynolds has signed on for projects with Amazon and Netflix, but he has not signed on with a major studio for a theatrical film in years. The next theatrical film he has coming out is an animated movie about animals. The two projects he's producing through maximum effort may never come to fruition. Ryan has been rejected with scripts from Sony, by Disney, and by Marvel. He has pitched so much to Disney, and they have shut him down over and over and over. Blake has not signed with anyone for a theatrical movie since this happened. She signed on for a streaming film that will probably never be created. So there have been real-life consequences, and I think that's part of the reason why Blake and Ryan are digging their heels in so hard. But here's what they're up against. Wayfarer has the records. They have the recorded calls. They have Sony and WME now giving them evidence. It's really unfortunate that Wayfarer can't sue Sony for what they did, because Sony absolutely frustrated this entire experience and allowed Blake and Ryan to hijack this film. Sony made money on the film, but it wasn't the film Wayfarer created. As the creators, the financiers, and the people that literally paid for everything and paid all the salaries for everyone, they were in charge of the film It Ends With Us Movie LLC. No one else. Blake and Ryan hijacked $30 million, and somehow they became the face of the movie. In no other industry would this happen but Hollywood. So they're caught on recorded calls, the evidence is mounting, the sealed documents will eventually come out. And when they do, I believe we're going to see one of the biggest scandals in Hollywood history. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds used their power, their connections, and their threats to steal a film from the people who created it and financed it. They locked those people in a basement at their own premiere. They destroyed reputations, fired staff, and hijacked creative control, all while playing the victims. The recorded calls with WME and Sony will prove everything. And when those calls become public, their careers might never recover. The question is, will justice be served, or will Hollywood protect its own? We'll find out when those documents are unsealed on December 19th. Stay tuned. This is far from over.